Oh, welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today I'm joined by David Templeman from Roving Tale Farm in Brownington. David, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, you said you've watched a few of the other interviews, correct?
Yes. Have you done the one with Julie Hubbard yet? I haven't seen that.
June 8th.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. I saw one with a fellow from Derby that was really good. His story of going to school in Rhode Island and getting caught.
Derek. Yeah, Derek Grant.
Right, that was a really good one.
Yeah, okay, cool. So you know how we start this off then. Would you hit me with your 5-minute life story?
Yeah, sure. So born in San Francisco, multi-generational California family. Dad's family came during the Mexican period. Mom's family came just right after the gold rush. So my son is 7th generation. Decided to say goodbye to the city life, to California, to San Francisco, and become an agriculturalist, a regenerative farmer in northern Vermont. So growing up in the city, you know, it was definitely just coming out of the 1960s. I was born in '74, so there was still that glow and the sense of that era of the 60s, and you know, drugs were all over the place. It was a pretty dirty city when I was a kid. I remember my mom driving through the Haight-Ashbury, you know, maybe being 7 or 8 years old and looking out the window and thinking, Mom, you know, don't stop the car. Let's not go this way anymore, you know. It's cleaned up a lot since then, though. But, you know, the place really lost a lot of its appeal for me. And what I really wanted to do was connect with the land and be a land steward and give back all that I've taken, you know. I've left a pretty big footprint on this planet, and now it's time to kind of pay back. So I started this regenerative grazing operation. I have sheep. Occasionally you'll hear them in the background. I graze regeneratively. So the objective here is to sequester CO2 from the atmosphere and build soil. And I approach cannabis cultivation from the same perspective, that, you know, we're doing this in such a way that we're trying to give back, not just take. So if I were looking at it from an economic standpoint, I would be definitely focusing on indoor cultivation. But with all of its challenges, ethically, I need to approach cannabis from an outdoor perspective. So integrating a lot of the aspects of my farm into my soil. So sheep manure, cow manure, chicken manure, wool, scraps from on-farm slaughter.
Wool. What are you doing with the wool?
Wool makes an amazing slow-release nitrogen fertilizer.
Okay,
so,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I wanted to hear about that. Yeah.
Also, really an aerator as well, right? It's buoyant and can hold air and water. So, you know, it offers soil structure and nutrition. Same thing could be said with bird feathers, chicken feathers.
Huh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow, I just woke up. I already learned something today. All right.
So, you know, I'm practicing a lot of the same principles that you know, people are talking about Korean natural farming or living soil. So, you know, I'm trying to promote the soil not only for my cannabis, but in my pasture here. You know, trying to enliven the mycology, the microbacteria, the fungus, you know, even the insect population, right? And up from there. So I'm looking for biodiversity. I'm looking for as many hay crops and even weeds and native plants. And I want as much diversity in my fields as possible. I want the mycology just pumping away. I want to see atmosphere being sucked down, drawn down into the soil, depth of soil increasing, quality of soil increasing, carbon levels of soil increasing.
Now that's something I've read a little bit about is the depth of the soil. Can you explain a little bit about why that's important?
Well, it depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. So a lot of soil scientists really just look at the first 6 inches of the soil, and that's where, most everything is happening in the living world. But, that's an average over the entire planet. There are parts of our planet that have no living soil at all, right? Just barren desert. And then there are places, I think they're called alluvial soil regions, like in imagine like a delta or grasslands where the soils get very, very deep. The root penetration of these perennials get very, very deep. So roots are made of carbon. So the deeper the roots find their way through the native soils, the more carbon is being held in those soils. So yeah.
Cool. I've never heard of, you mentioned something about the Korean farming, and I had never heard of that, and I for sure was curious when you said that.
Yeah. So Korean natural farming is a practice put forth. I forget that. I think he was a scientist, a soil scientist from Korea. I think there was also at the same time a Japanese scientist, and they were exchanging information. But it's sort of the principle of compost tea without fermentation. So you're making infusions with your watering reservoir, say kelp, barley husks, molasses, and then feeding that to the soil to enliven the soil so that the soil feeds your plants in part.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, can you tell me real quick what type of licenses you're looking for in the retail market?
So what I'm doing, I've incorporated a cultivation company, Cannamentals. So I'm looking for a tier 1 cultivation outdoor license. I believe the upward level is 125 plants for that level outdoor. I'm also working with and renting to another license seeker who's looking to do processing tier 2, which I believe is edibles.
Yeah. Oh, manufacturing. Yeah.
She's setting up a small factory in our secondary building and pursuing licensing for that. So I'm a partner in her company.
Oh, I'd love to meet her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Toss her my name sometime, see if she might be down to chat.
She would, yeah.
That'd be great. That's cool to see you guys are partnering. That seems like maybe those two things go hand in hand.
Indeed. I was shooting for a much more vertically integrated conglomeration with various friends. And so, I brought a lot of people into this pretty early on, but you throw a bunch of stuff to the wall, doesn't it all stick? This is where we landed. Two licenses, 2 partners. She heads up the edibles, I head up the cultivation.
Cool. Now that is a good segue, I believe, into asking you about the status of your application here.
Right. So I received an email with a review and a list of items they did not have in my application. So very quickly, we updated our application so that it had all of the missing parts they were looking for. And then they acknowledged that they received that and then sent me the link for the security check. And that's where it stands. It's been maybe a week since I filled out the security information, sent my check. We'll see. My cutoff point for planting is June 1st. So basically, if I don't get my license tomorrow, it doesn't matter the timing anymore.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's a concern for a lot of guys who are growing outdoor. That's really why I wanted to have you on here. along with the other stuff, but I also have some concerns that outdoor growers who have really geared up for this market, who have maybe put a lot of money in, expecting that, these licenses would be approved, bang, 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 are going to start bleeding money here. Maybe their investors are going to come looking for some returns. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do know some people in my area who are being hit pretty hard by the possibility of a delay. Not just outdoor cultivators, but all of the licenses seem to be delayed right now. At the same time, I have to say, I'm going to get hit by this pretty bad. I've borrowed money to get my operation going, but it is what it is, and it is what it has to be. I'm not like holding anybody responsible, or I am disappointed. I am very disappointed. I was looking forward to having a productive year. Unfortunately, for other people who are planning on putting in retail operations or a true vertically integrated operation, they need employees, and they've taken on the employees, and they're paying people right now, and there's no money coming in. And if the money doesn't come in on time, they're going to be left holding, the bag for a cash flow problem that, in a lot of ways, the state will be responsible for. I'm not upset. I just, it is what it is,
Yeah, and again, an interesting point that someone made to me was that no one was promised a license on May 1st, but they would just start issuing them. So I understand that part of the argument too, where it's like, yeah, this wasn't a guarantee, but also if you did have the first license approved, say on May 1st, you were the first one approved, and you didn't have all your ducks in a row ready to go, you'd be in the same boat where you have these investors and you're not ready to make money.
Yeah, rough, very rough.
And you said that was about a week ago, huh? When you updated all your info?
About a week.
Okay, well, keep us posted on that. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the regenerative farming and agriculture, because that's something that has really piqued my interest lately, especially the rotational grazing sort of stuff. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the idea is that there is a symbiotic relationship between grass and forage species and ruminant mammals, mammals with four stomachs. So that would include sheep, cows, goats. I believe bison are included in that. So are deer. So, these are grazing animals, and they evolved around the evolution of grass, which is actually, grass is a really new plant on the front of plants. And so here's the animal that feeds constantly on this plant that grows constantly. That's why we mow grass, because it's like hair. You're constantly growing it, at least during the warm, wet seasons. So a whole sort of system built around this a few tens of millions of years ago, where predator species started chasing large herds of these herbivores feeding on grass. So it's a constantly moving sea of animals, right? Where they're being chased by wolves, they're being chased by lions, and always on the move, always eating, never staying in one place so long that the pressure that they're applying to the grass is overgrazing, right? So humans came in on the scene, tried to mimic this system by building fences and keeping these animals behind the fences on grasslands, on pasture. But these pastures very quickly get overgrazed, and weeds pop up in the place of the preferred feed plants, right? So all of a sudden, after a certain amount of time, all you have left are weeds, and the animals don't want to eat any of that. So we're trying to look back in time. How did these packs, these herds of wild animals behave that was beneficial to the environment, how do we reproduce that? So the idea is biomimicry. Like, I've got a herd of sheep, and we don't have wolves on the property, thank goodness, but I'm the wolf. I create a new paddock and then move the sheep into that paddock every other day. So they're constantly on the move on the property, and they're grouped together in tight little networks, right? So they're never returning to the same spot for like 70 days. The advantage of this is you don't get overgrazing. The rest period for the pasture is great enough that the recovery is completed by the time the sheep come back on that spot again. And that pattern of being heavily, intensely grazed and then allowed to rest for, say, 2 months allows for a sequestration, right? For photosynthesis to take place in a vegetative period. You know, just like cannabis, right? We've got the initial germination period, and then there's a vegetation period. Most of the growth in the plant itself takes place during the vegetative phase. So that's where most of the sequestration is taking place, where photosynthesis is using sunlight and water to create complex sugars in the plant. So these sugars are then pumped down the roots into the mycology in the soil and spread out. And so this is carbon, right? This is actually taking atmospheric carbon that we've released through industry and pulling it back biologically through photosynthesis, right? So by keeping the grazing at a timing that keeps the pasture in a regenerative, vegetative state, we are able to increase the amount of photosynthesis taking place. So if a pasture is just left ungrazed, the field will turn to seed. So basically it'll go to flower, and much of the photosynthesis changes. It's not going towards the building of plant structure or roots. It's going to build seed. It's going to build flower. So it's exactly the opposite of what I'm doing with cannabis. Like, I want my cannabis to flower. I don't want my fields to go to seed or flower. So I'm putting on a pressure with an animal that has a symbiotic relationship with the pasture in a rotational pattern. So this helps the animals spread manure evenly. This helps the animal preventing them from passing on parasites. You know, so imagine if they're just standing in their own refuse in the same paddock.
Sure.
Yeah. So it keeps things clean, right? And then the neighbors love it when they're down by the road, right? Everybody stops their car, and yeah, it's a big social event. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
My buddy actually said also he would have birds come in behind the sheep because worms will grow in the shit, and then you can feed your birds or something like that.
Yeah. So that's multi-species grazing. I'm warming up to that. You know, there's a lot going on here, and it's very expensive. And I've just gotten it to the point after doing this for 6 years where it pays for itself, and I'm able to make a little money doing it. But farming is not a money maker, you know.
Yeah, which is unfortunate that everything has to be about money.
Yeah, I'm trying to not let it be.
But it sort of has to be at a certain extent, you know. You need it to get going. Yep. But I certainly respect that position. You know, I've run into a couple of folks who seem like that's what the cannabis industry is all about for them, is just making money. And it's kind of sad to me to hear that perspective. Although, you know, I'm open to everything, and certainly you need to make money if you want to run a successful business. But I don't think it should be the main focus.
I'm really moved by the principle that Michael Pollan put forward in The Botany of Desire. He takes 4 plants, including cannabis, potatoes, tulips, and what's the other one? Potatoes, tulips, cannabis, and apples. So apple, sugar. Cannabis represents the psychedelic. Potatoes are like, a huge calorie crop, right? That feeds millions of people. And tulips are beautiful. And our relationships with these things, you have to wonder who's working for who. Is the plant my servant, or am I serving the plant, right? So we've gone out of our way to take care of this plant, cannabis, at great peril, at great risk, risking jail time, social ostracization, right? All kinds of social consequences in our lifetimes, yet we still do it. And it's not necessarily addiction, right? There's a relationship that's really deep and special. And we really do have to ask ourselves, who's in charge here? And so I find myself in that same position with all of my projects on my land, right? The sheep or me. In a lot of ways, I'm serving the sheep, I'm serving the chicken, I'm serving the cannabis, and I'm serving it on the table, I'm serving it in the pipe, but I'm also serving it, right? So, and then the people who are just chasing the money, what are they serving? They're serving money, they're serving that, objective. And all I do is put out a question like, what do we really want to do here? Yeah. Like, do we want to be slaves of money, or do we want to be involved in something really special?
That's a great perspective, Dave. Wow. That's definitely I've said this before to a buddy, and I was kind of just joking around. I said, I can't wait till we find out that the plants are actually smarter than us. So when you say who are we serving them, or what are we doing? Sometimes I do feel like that, I don't know. People seem to think that humans are the most evolved intelligence on Earth, but then I look at what some of these animals and plants are capable of, and you go, maybe that's not entirely accurate.
Well, I mean, thinking about people, when we are individual people without the advantage of a team or help, we are actually really quite weak and not that bright. We get ours through our social bonds and our shared intelligence. And we're not the only network, right? So this mycology I'm talking about actually serves as the internet for the plant world. And it might be comparable in one way or another to our own neurology and our own social networking. Or maybe we are actually part of it too. The idea that it's smarter than us or we're smarter than it. How about we are it? We are part of it,
There you go.
Yeah.
I think you smashed the nail on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice. Now listen, you were talking about, you said you encourage people to grow outdoor because of the environmental impacts of indoor, and you're trying to spread the word that Topshelf outdoor is a thing. I think you mentioned that on the phone. Tell me what you meant by that.
Yeah. So, I've been trying to fight the narrative up here, and I've been told that this narrative, and I'm about to say it, but I, preface everything, that this narrative was presented by the industry, so the larger corporate entities, but that, outdoors for extract, indoors for flower. And, that's just not true. I do believe Vermont poses a big challenge for the outdoor cultivator to produce, a top shelf product, to be sure. But it's very, very possible. And it's not like I'm an expert I'm a fly on the wall in California, but I've been able to get some people out here and consult with me, and have had some really great successes. And I think I have a strategy to deal with all of the problems presented in this northern wet climate.
Now you said you learned how to grow out in California.
Yeah.
So were you growing outdoor out there or indoor or both?
At that time, I was growing indoor. This was under Proposition 215. So a lot of people don't realize, but we've had quasi-legalized recreational cannabis in California for 31 years. And for the first few years of Prop 215, there was just a big gray zone, right? So it was medical, but no doctor would put their name on it. So essentially, you claim your own medical need, and what you have is a unofficial recreational market. And so cannabis buyer clubs popped up in the city, and back 31 years ago. From there, that's how this whole thing really took flight all over the country. So in that gray zone period, I bought my first house, and I had 5 high pressure sodium bulbs set up in my basement, and paid my mortgage for the first few years. But actually found that starting my own company in construction ended up being a lot more money for a lot less effort and a lot less risk. So I was able to transition out of that and just pursue a more conventional way of making money. But then when I sold out of that business and moved to Vermont, started this regenerative farm, and then the advent of legalized cannabis in Vermont, all of a sudden, I'm back to thinking about doing this again. Actually,
so you sort of got out of the game, and now you've been drawn back in.
But not totally out of the game. I've always been a fly on the wall. I mean, all my buddies have always been cultivators in California. I've always had a connection to that world, and was able to call upon it for advice when that time was necessary. And I'd love to share actually some of the things that
You share whatever you like, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. So these are not trade secrets. I mean, these are things that people are doing to combat the harsh outdoor environments. And I think a lot of people take for granted that California's weather must be nice, but California is a big state with all the types of environments. And of course, the places where people traditionally cultivated in California were the harshest places because there weren't people there, right? Yeah, right. Mountains. And there are huge mountains in California. The tallest mountains in the lower 48 states are in California. There are conditions that are harsher than Vermont in California, and people cultivate in those areas. So one of the things that was really driven home to me is the importance of silica in the development of lignins in the plant and cell walls. So I'm trying to deliver silica in multiple forms through my soil amendments, through my fertilization. So I'm actually depending on something from the Build the Soil people. They introduced the idea of rice hulls. So rice hulls are made of silica, and their texture aerates the soil. And their pH is relatively not going to throw off your mix. They're quite expensive to purchase through Amazon or through Build a Soil, but I think well worth it just for the silica properties. So a plant that's allowed access to silica is able to build stronger, thicker branches, endure less damage from wind, hold resistance against fungus infestation, mildew. So the thicker cell walls prevent the fungus from entering the cell, right? So I'm using as well a liquid silica fertilizer. So I'm not a total purist. This is I don't think it's a synthesized product, but it is a refined product. And I generally try to stay away from that. I'm really trying to use organic materials to build my soils, to feed my soils. But the silica is so critical up here, especially as we get closer to the end of September, the beginning of October. Brownington gets super wet, and the impact of it can be devastating. So I'm also looking for genetics. I'm looking for a plant that doesn't make big buds. Big buds rot on the inside, right? So I'm looking for those tight little golf ball sized buds. And that's about genetics, right? Also, genetics would dictate a early girl genetics, right? Something that's ready to harvest last week of September, first week of October. I just can't seem to be able to get longer than that without the crop failing, So early girl genetics, small buds, or golf ball size, medium sized buds. Nitrogen. So I think it was Ed Rosenthal who very early on suggested flushing your nutrients at the end of your flowering cycle is beneficial for flavor and all of that. This has been dismissed in several studies now. Maybe later I could share citations with you. But what is shown is that higher than normal nitrogen levels at the end of cropping actually helps the plant protect against frost. So, very counterintuitive. Everybody's going to say, no, you got to flush. You got to, hold back on the nitrogen. I'm doing nitrogen right up to the end.
I'm curious to hear what other people will say about that as well.
Yeah. I mean, there have been a few well-studied folk that come out of the woodwork and agree with me, but for the most part, people are stuck on these old ideas about things. And I was stuck on that idea up until a year and a half ago myself. So,
and what differences have you noticed? Other than, is there a difference in quality other than just like, it protects better against frost, or like, is the outcome the better product at the end?
Well, both. I would say the plant needs nitrogen. You don't want to starve the plant at the end. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You want to give the plant everything that it needs right up to the date of harvest. So I think you're going to have a better terpene profile. I think you're going to, who knows, maybe even have higher cannabinoid levels. But I'm hypothesizing here. This
Sure.
isn't, but you kind of asked me to hypothesize.
I did, absolutely.
But I can say for sure that the plant is going to be more resistant to frost and even freezing temperatures. I've been told in California in the Sierra Nevada foothills that outdoor crops can withstand sustained levels of snow based on these levels.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Dave, I got about 4 minutes here, and I'm going to have to take off after this. I have a couple phone calls to make, but you mentioned something about provisional licenses. You thought the CCB should have maybe issued provisional licenses so outdoor growers could get going. What would you say? I know Julie's been watching these, so if you could say something to Julie right now, what would you say to her?
I would say if they could very quickly put together some kind of provisional placeholder license that allows us to get our plants in the ground and not break the law. And then, should we not get our license, then we would be required to remove our plants, clearly. But at least, a stopgap measure so that we're not left stranded here this year, having completely been cut off from being able to grow outdoor. But it's really late in the game. I don't blame Julie. I don't blame, the other board members. I know that they're really up against a lot of pressures right now. And I think they're doing a really good job, actually. I think they really are trying to find a balance and give the mom and pop level cultivators and business people a real opportunity here. Hopefully an opportunity that stays around for a long time. I'd hate to see what happened in California happen here, you know?
Great point. I just want to, you got 3 minutes now. I wanted to let you brag a little bit because you said you had the distinction of receiving a compliment from a head of Terramore testing lab for having the highest THC levels they've ever tested.
Yeah, well, not from indoor, from outdoor. So I identified my sample as being outdoor, and I think the bottom line THC level is 20.5. It's not a lot to brag about, actually, but it's hard to get 20.5 up here, and really, again, has a lot to do with genetics. I think you really need to carry your plant right to full maturity, and you can't do that in November. You know, you can't do that in late October. I don't even think you could do that in mid-October unless it's a really warm year. Yeah. It's really about genetics. It's the plant that did it, man. It's not me.
Well, that seems like a great note to leave it on. I'd love to try that, by the way. I love outdoor. I don't know who all these naysayers are. Yeah,
come on up. I'd love to have you over, man. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll make that happen, man. I come up to the neck regularly, so I'll give you a jingle and we'll get together. Thank you again for your time, man. We'll definitely have to follow this up again. Keep me posted on your license.
Will do.
All right. Thanks for your time, man. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right.